The coffee pot was heavy in her hand as she made her way between the tables. Again, the same route she'd walked 1,000 times before. Fill the cups, take the orders, smile even when her feet were screaming. This was her life now, and she'd made peace with it. Or at least that's what she told herself every morning when the alarm went off at 5. Her name was Maya Chen, and she was 28 years old. 3 years ago, she'd walked through the doors of Romano's Italian restaurant looking for any job that would pay the bills. She got hired on the spot. Mr. Romano, the owner, said she had kind eyes. She didn't tell him that those eyes were tired from crying over her father's hospital bills. She just said thank you and asked what time her first shift started. Now, 3 years later, she knew every scratch on every table. She knew which customers wanted their coffee before they even sat down, and which ones needed a few minutes to settle in. She knew the kitchen staff's jokes before they told them, and she could predict exactly when the dinner rush would hit on any given night. Her coworkers thought she was good at her job. They were right. What they didn't know was that being good at something didn't mean you loved it. Most of her coworkers didn't know much about her at all. She was the quiet one, reliable, always on time, never complained. Picked up extra shifts when people called in sick, but she didn't join them for drinks after work, and she never came to the birthday parties or the barbecues. It wasn't that she didn't like them. She just didn't have the energy for anything extra. By the time her shift ended, all she wanted was to go home, take off her shoes, and disappear into the only part of her day that still felt like hers. Her apartment was small. Really small. The kind of place where you could cook dinner, watch TV, and reach your bed without taking more than a few steps. The landlord called it cozy. She called it cheap, which was all that mattered. There was a leak under the sink she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. The heater made weird noises in the winter, but it was hers, and the rent was something she could actually afford on a waitress salary. In the corner of that tiny apartment sat an old keyboard. Not the kind musicians dream about. This was the kind you find at a thrift store for $40, with a few keys that stuck and speakers that crackled when you turned the volume up. She'd bought it 2 years ago on a day when she'd felt particularly low. Just walked into the thrift store during her lunch break, and there it was, covered in dust and probably forgotten by whoever had donated it. Every single night, no matter how tired she was, Maya sat down at that keyboard. Her fingers would find the keys like they were greeting old friends, and then she'd play, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. She played songs she'd learned as a kid. She played songs she'd heard on the radio. But mostly she played things that came from somewhere deep inside her, melodies that she couldn't explain and didn't have names for. Music hadn't always been just a hobby. There was a time when it was everything. As a child, she'd started piano lessons when she was 6 years old. Her teacher said she had a gift. By the time she was in high school, she was winning competitions and performing at recitals. Everyone assumed she'd go to music school. She assumed it too. She'd already picked out which conservatory she wanted to attend. She could see her whole future laid out like a path she was meant to walk. But life has a way of changing your plans whether you're ready or not. During her senior year of high school, her father got sick. Really sick. Cancer. The kind that requires treatments that cost more money than most families have. Her mother worked 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. The bills kept coming. The number at the bottom kept getting bigger. Her college fund disappeared first, then her parents' savings. Then they started borrowing from relatives who barely had enough for themselves. She made the decision herself. Nobody asked her to do it. Her parents actually fought her on it, especially her mother. But she couldn't watch them drown in debt while she spent money on music school. It felt selfish. It felt wrong. So she stayed home. She got a business degree from the local community college instead because it was practical and affordable. She worked part-time jobs to help with the medical bills, and she told herself that music could wait. Her father needed her more. He survived the cancer. That was the good news. He was weak and tired all the time now, but he was alive. The bad news was that by the time he recovered, the economy had crashed. It was 2008 and everyone was losing their jobs. Her brand new business degree felt worthless. Nobody was hiring. The few interviews she got went nowhere. She applied to over 100 jobs in 6 months and got rejection after rejection until she stopped counting. That's when she ended up at Romano's. It was supposed to be temporary, just until something better came along, just until the economy recovered, just until she could figure out her next move. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent When you're not paying attention, 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. And here she was, 28 years old, serving pasta to strangers and wondering where all that time had gone. The hardest part wasn't the work itself. She could handle long shifts and rude customers and the smell of garlic that never quite washed out of her clothes. The hardest part was the feeling that she'd buried a piece of herself somewhere along the way. That girl who played piano in competitions and dreamed about performing in concert halls felt like a different person, a stranger she used to know but couldn't quite remember anymore. Her mother had noticed. Mothers always notice. A few months ago, over Sunday dinner, she'd asked Maya if she ever thought about going back to music, really going back, not just playing on a cheap keyboard in a tiny apartment. Maya had changed the subject quickly, maybe too quickly. The truth was she thought about it all the time. But thinking about it and actually doing something about it were two completely different things. What would she even do? She was almost 30. Most professional musicians started serious training as children. She'd lost years. And besides, she had responsibilities. Her mother's health wasn't great either now. There were bills to pay, rent, groceries, life. You couldn't eat dreams. You couldn't pay rent with maybes and what-ifs, so she kept going to work, kept smiling at customers, kept pretending that this was enough. And late at night, when the restaurant was closed and the city was quiet, she sat at her keyboard and played music that nobody else would ever hear. It was safer that way. If nobody heard it, nobody could tell her it wasn't good enough. Nobody could confirm what she already feared, that maybe she'd waited too long and missed her chance. But sometimes, when her fingers moved across those sticky keys and a melody filled her small apartment, she felt something wake up inside her, something that had been sleeping but wasn't quite dead, something that whispered that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. She never listened to that whisper for long. It was dangerous to hope for things you couldn't have. She had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. That in just a few days, her carefully controlled, small, safe life was going to explode in ways she couldn't imagine. That one moment, one decision, one song would take everything she thought she knew about herself and turn it completely upside down. For now, though, she was just a waitress, and that seemed like all she'd ever be. Friday nights at Romano's were always chaos. The kind of chaos where you didn't have time to think, only move. Take an order, deliver food, clear a table, repeat. Maya had learned to operate on autopilot during the dinner rush. Her body knew what to do even when her mind wandered somewhere else. But this Friday was different. There was something extra happening tonight, a party, a big one. Mr. Romano had mentioned it earlier in the week. Some local music teacher was retiring after 40 years, and her former students were throwing her a celebration. They'd reserved the entire back section of the restaurant. 75 people were expected. What made it unusual was the piano. Maya had noticed it that morning when she arrived for her shift. Someone had delivered a beautiful grand piano and positioned it in the corner of the party section. It was stunning. Black and polished so well she could see her reflection in it. Nothing like the little keyboard in her apartment. This was the real thing. The kind of instrument she used to dream about owning. She'd walked past it maybe 20 times during her shift. Each time something pulled at her chest. Her fingers would twitch without permission, remembering what it felt like to play on keys that didn't stick. On an instrument that was made for music, not just Lian Shi. She forced herself to look away every time. That piano wasn't for her. It was for whoever they'd hired to play at the party. The evening rush started right on schedule. The party guests began arriving around 6. They were a cheerful group, lots of hugging and laughing. Many of them were musicians themselves, Maya could tell. They had that way of moving, like they heard rhythms nobody else could hear. The guest of honor arrived at 6:30. Mrs. Patricia Hoffman. She was a small woman with white hair and the brightest smile Maya had ever seen. Everyone in the room seemed to light up when she walked in. Maya was assigned to serve the party section along with two other servers. She brought out appetizers, filled wine glasses, and tried not to stare at the piano. But she couldn't help overhearing the conversations around her. People were sharing stories about Mrs. Hoffman, how she'd taught them to love music, how patient she'd been when they wanted to quit, how she'd believed in them when nobody else did. Maya felt something twist inside her. She'd had a teacher like that once. Mrs. Chen had been tough but encouraging. She wondered whatever happened to her. Around 7 o'clock, Mr. Romano started looking worried. Maya noticed him checking his watch and glancing toward the door. Then he made a phone call. From the expression on his face, it wasn't good news. He hung up and ran his hand through his hair in that way he did when something went wrong. Maya was clearing plates from a nearby table when she heard him talking to one of the party organizers. The pianist they'd hired wasn't coming. Car trouble on the highway. She was stuck 2 hours away and there was no way she'd make it in time. The organizer looked devastated. They'd planned for Mrs. Hoffman to be surprised with performances from several of her former students, but they needed someone to play the piano parts. None of them had brought their instruments. The piano was supposed to accompany them. Maya kept working, but her heart was pounding. She looked at the piano sitting there, silent and waiting. She looked at Mrs. Hoffman, who was laughing with friends and had no idea that part of her special night was falling apart. She looked at Mr. Romano, who was apologizing even though it wasn't his fault. Her hands were shaking as she loaded dirty dishes onto her tray. This was crazy. She was a waitress. She couldn't just offer to play piano at a stranger's retirement party. What if she messed up? What if she was rusty? She hadn't played a real piano in years. What if everyone laughed? But then she remembered something her old teacher used to say. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about showing up. Before she could talk herself out of it, Maya walked over to Mr. Romano. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. She had to repeat herself. She told him she could play piano. Just basic stuff, nothing fancy. But if they needed someone, she could try to help. Mr. Romano stared at her like she'd just spoken in another language. In 3 years, she'd never mentioned anything about music. He knew her as someone who showed up on time and did her job. That was it. He asked if she was serious. She nodded, not trusting her voice anymore. He didn't have any other options, so he said yes. He told the party organizer. The organizer looked skeptical but desperate. She pulled Maya aside and quickly explained what they needed. Just some simple accompaniment for a few songs. Nothing too complicated. Could she handle that? Maya's mouth was dry. She said she'd do her best. That was all she could promise. Walking toward that piano felt like walking through water. Everything moved in slow motion. Her co-workers were staring. Some of the party guests had noticed something was happening. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her back. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear, but her feet kept moving forward. She sat down on the bench. It had been so long since she'd sat at a real piano. The bench was the right height. The keys were perfectly balanced. She touched them gently, barely making a sound. They felt like coming home. The organizer handed her some sheet music. Standard songs that most pianists knew. Maya glanced at them and nodded. She could do this. Probably. Maybe. She had to try. But then something shifted inside her. These people didn't need perfect. They needed real. They needed heart. And Maya had spent 3 years pushing her heart down so deep, she'd almost forgotten it was there. Maybe it was time to let it out. She looked at Mrs. Hoffman sitting at the head table with that bright smile. She thought about all those students who'd shared stories about how this woman had changed their lives through music. She thought about her own teacher, her own lost dreams, her keyboard at home that nobody ever heard. Maya's hands found the keys. But she didn't play the songs on the sheet music. Not yet. First she played something else. Something she'd written herself during the worst days of her father's illness. She'd never played it for anyone. She'd barely even played it for herself because it hurt too much. It was called Borrowed Time, though nobody knew that but her. The first notes fell into the room like raindrops. Soft, careful. Then more came. The melody built slowly, carrying all the sadness of watching someone you love suffer. But then it shifted. It found hope hiding underneath the pain. It found beauty in the struggle. It found light in the darkness. The restaurant got quiet. Not just the party room. The entire restaurant. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The kitchen staff appeared in the doorway, dish towels still in their hands. Mr. Romano stood frozen by the bar. Maya wasn't thinking anymore. She was just playing. Her fingers remembered things her mind had forgotten. They moved across the keys like they'd been waiting for this moment for years. Every disappointment, every sacrifice, every night spent playing alone in her apartment poured out through the music. It wasn't perfect. She hit a wrong note twice. But it was honest. It was real. It was her. The song built to a crescendo that filled the room with sound. Then it gentled again, settling into a resolution that felt like acceptance. Like peace. When the final note faded, Maya sat very still. Her hands were trembling. Her eyes were wet. She didn't want to look up. Didn't want to see people's faces. Didn't want to know what they thought. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the entire restaurant erupted in applause. People were standing up. The party guests were on their feet. Mrs. Hoffman had tears streaming down her face. Mr. Romano was shaking his head in disbelief. Her co-workers looked like they were seeing her for the first time. Maya stood up quickly, her face burning. She stammered something about the sheet music, about playing the songs they'd actually wanted. But the organizer was hugging her, thanking her, saying that was exactly what they needed, that it was perfect. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Maya played the accompaniment for the other performances. Everyone sang and celebrated and toasted Mrs. Hoffman, but people kept looking at Maya differently now, whispering, pointing. She heard fragments of conversations. Did you know she could play like that? Where did she learn? Why is she working here? She didn't see the man in the corner recording on his phone. Didn't notice when he posted the video online with a caption. Didn't realize that while she was finishing her shift and going home to her tiny apartment, something was already spreading across the internet. By morning, everything would be different. But for now, she was still just a waitress who'd touched a piano. And for the first time in years, she'd remembered what it felt like to really play. Maya woke up Saturday morning to 17 missed calls. Her phone was buzzing so much it had vibrated itself halfway off the nightstand. She grabbed it, confused and still half asleep. Most of the calls were from numbers she didn't recognize. There were also 43 text messages. Something was wrong. Had someone died? Was her mom okay? The first text was from her coworker, Lisa. It just said OMG Maya with about 10 exclamation points. Not helpful. The second was from another coworker with a link. No explanation, just a link. Maya's hands were shaking as she clicked it. The video loaded. It took her a second to understand what she was seeing. It was her, sitting at the piano at Romano's, playing. The angle was from somewhere in the crowd. You could see her face, see her hands moving across the keys. You could hear every note of the song she'd played. The song she'd written. The song nobody was supposed to hear. Her stomach dropped. The video had been posted 15 hours ago. She looked at the view count and her vision went blurry. 2 million views. 2 million. That couldn't be right. She refreshed the page. 2.3 million now. The caption read, "This woman is a waitress. Nobody knew she could play like this." Listen to the end. Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. She scrolled down to the comments. There were thousands of them. Tens of thousands. People from all over the world had watched her play. Were watching her right now, writing things about her music. Most of the comments made her eyes water. This made me cry. Who is she? This is the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. The emotion in this performance is incredible. I've listened to this 10 times already. Professional musicians were commenting too. People with verified accounts and millions of followers. They were analyzing her technique, praising her phrasing, asking about the composition. But there were other comments too, the kind that made her chest tight. She's probably not even that good in person. The acoustics in that room are doing all the work. Anyone can have one good moment on camera. I bet she was just playing someone else's song. Her phone rang again. This time she answered. It was Mr. Romano. He sounded excited and stressed at the same time. The restaurant phone had been ringing off the hook all morning. News stations wanted to interview her. People were calling to make reservations just hoping to see her. Someone from the local TV station was already outside the restaurant waiting. Maya told him she wasn't coming in today. She had the day off. He asked if she'd seen the video. She said yes. He said her life was about to change. She said she didn't want it to change. Then she hung up. For the next hour, she sat on her bed staring at her phone as the numbers kept climbing. 3 million views, 4 million. The video was being shared everywhere. She saw it pop up on different platforms. People were reposting it with their own captions. Hidden talent. From waitress to viral sensation. The performance everyone is talking about. Someone had created a compilation of reaction videos. Strangers filming themselves watching her play. Their faces showing every emotion. Some were crying. Some were smiling. Some just looked shocked. It felt surreal. These people didn't know her. They didn't know anything about her life or her story or why she'd given up music. But they felt something when they heard her play. That should have felt good. Instead, it felt terrifying. By afternoon, the video had been picked up by major news outlets. Articles started appearing. Mystery waitress stuns internet with piano performance. Viral video shows hidden talent in unexpected place. They'd found out her name somehow. Found out where she worked. One article mentioned that she'd won piano competitions in high school. Someone had done research, dug into her past, put pieces together that she'd spent years trying to forget. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Numbers from different area codes, different countries. She stopped answering. Let them all go to voicemail. When she finally listened to the messages later, most were from reporters. But some were different. A woman from the Riverside Conservatory of Music. She said they'd love to talk to Maya about finishing her musical education. They could offer a full scholarship, housing assistance, whatever she needed. A composer named Richard Chen. No relation, he clarified. He said he'd been working in film music for 20 years. He'd watched her video 5 times. He wanted to mentor her, help her develop her compositions, introduce her to people in the industry. A venue manager from the West Side Performance Hall. They had a resident artist program, a steady salary, performance opportunities, complete creative freedom. She should call back as soon as possible. Maya deleted all the messages. Then she felt guilty and listened to them again. Wrote down the numbers, stared at them. Put the paper in a drawer, took it out, put it back. Her mom called around dinner time. She'd seen the video. Someone from her church had shown her. She was crying on the phone. Happy tears, she said. She told Maya she was so proud. Asked why Maya hadn't told her she was playing at the restaurant. Maya tried to explain that it just happened. It wasn't planned. She didn't mean for any of this. Her mom got quiet. Then she said something that hit Maya hard. She said watching Maya give up music all those years ago was one of the most painful things she'd ever witnessed. Even harder than her husband's cancer. Because that was something that happened to them. But watching Maya sacrifice her dreams, that was something Maya chose. Something her mother felt responsible for even though Maya had made the decision herself. Maya hadn't known her mother felt that way. They'd never really talked about it. After she'd decided not to go to music school, everyone just accepted it and moved on. Or pretended to move on. Apparently her mother had been carrying that weight for 10 years. The rest of the weekend was a blur. The video hit 10 million views, then 15. Maya's social media accounts, which she barely used, exploded with followers. Thousands of people sending messages, some kind, some creepy, some angry that she wasn't responding. She stopped checking. She tried to leave her apartment on Sunday to get groceries. A woman recognized her in the parking lot. Asked for a photo. Maya said no thank you and practically ran back inside. She ordered delivery instead. The local news ran a story. They interviewed people at Romano's. Mr. Romano said she was a wonderful employee and he was happy for her success. Her coworkers said nice things. One of them mentioned that Maya always kept to herself. Another said they'd worked together for 3 years and never knew she could play piano. The reporter made it sound mysterious, like Maya had been hiding some secret identity. Monday morning came too fast. Maya was scheduled to work the lunch shift. She thought about calling in sick, but she'd never called in sick before. Not once in 3 years. She didn't want to start now just because of some video. She put on her uniform, the same black pants and white shirt she wore every shift, tied her hair back, looked at herself in the mirror. She looked exactly the same as always, but somehow everything felt different. The drive to Romano's felt longer than usual. When she pulled into the parking lot, there were cars everywhere. Way too many for a Monday lunch. There was a news van parked across the street. Her heart sank. She thought about turning around, going home, never coming back. But her rent was due in 2 weeks. She had bills, responsibilities. A video going viral didn't change any of that. Maya took a deep breath and got out of her car. She could do this. It was just work, just another shift. The attention would die down eventually. These things always did. In a week, everyone would forget about the waitress who played piano. Something else would go viral. Someone else would be the story everyone was talking about. She had no idea how wrong she was. As she walked toward the restaurant entrance, a reporter called out her name. A camera turned in her direction. She kept her head down and kept walking. Inside, the restaurant was packed. Every table full. People were looking at her, pointing, whispering. Mr. Romano rushed over immediately. He looked stressed but also excited in a way she'd never seen before. He asked if they could talk in his office. Maya followed him back, her heart pounding. This was it. He was going to fire her. All this attention was bad for business. People were treating the restaurant like a tourist attraction instead of a place to eat. But that's not what he said. Instead, he told her that the phone hadn't stopped ringing. People wanted to book the restaurant for events, private parties, corporate functions, all asking if she'd play piano. The restaurant had gotten more attention in 3 days than in the last 10 years. Then he said something she didn't expect. He asked what she wanted, not what she was going to do. What she wanted. Maya opened her mouth, but no words came out, because the truth was she had no idea. She'd spent so long not wanting anything, not letting herself want anything, that she'd forgotten how. All she knew was that her small, quiet, predictable life had just exploded into 1,000,000 pieces, and everyone was watching to see what she'd do next. Maya sat in Mr. Romano's office staring at the papers spread across his desk. 3 official offers, 3 different futures. Each one felt impossible in its own way. The conservatory letter promised everything she'd dreamed about 10 years ago. Full scholarship, private lessons with award-winning instructors, access to practice rooms with grand pianos, a chance to finally get the education she'd given up. But it was 4 hours away, full-time. She'd have to quit her job, leave her apartment, figure out how to help her mom without a steady paycheck. The mentorship offer from Richard Chen was different, more flexible. He wanted to work with her on compositions, help her develop her original music. He had connections in the film and television industry, people who were always looking for talented composers. But it wasn't a job. There was no salary, no guarantee it would lead anywhere, just potential, just possibility. The third offer was from the West Side Performance Hall, resident artist position. She'd play 2 nights a week, Friday and Saturday. They'd pay her decent money. Not great, but steady, enough to live on if she was careful. She could keep her apartment, stay close to her mom, but it meant performing, being on stage, having people watch her. Every week, forever, Mr. Romano had left her alone to think. She could hear the noise from the restaurant through the door. Dishes clattering, people talking. The lunch rush was starting without her. Her co-workers were out there covering her tables. She felt guilty about that, about all of this. Her phone buzzed. Another message from someone she didn't know. Another opportunity. Another person wanting something from her. She turned the phone face down on the desk. The really crazy thing was that 2 weeks ago she had no choices at all. Her life was simple, predictable. She knew exactly what every day would look like. Wake up, go to work, come home, play her keyboard, sleep, repeat. It was small, but it was safe. Now she had all these choices, and somehow that felt worse, because choosing one meant giving up the others. Choosing meant risk, and Maya had spent years avoiding risk. There was a knock on the door. Mr. Romano came back in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her and sat down. He didn't say anything at first, just sipped his coffee and waited. Finally, Maya spoke. She said she didn't know what to do, and that she was scared, that all of this felt too big, too fast, too much. Mr. Romano nodded like he understood. Then he told her a story she'd never heard before, about how he'd opened this restaurant 30 years ago, how everyone told him he was crazy. The location was wrong. The market was saturated. He'd fail within a year. But he'd done it anyway because the alternative was spending the rest of his life wondering, what if? He said the restaurant almost did fail, multiple times. There were months when he wasn't sure he could make payroll, times when he thought about giving up, but he hadn't. And now, 30 years later, he couldn't imagine having lived any other life. Then he looked at Maya and said something that stuck in her chest. He said fear was normal. Fear was smart even. But regret was worse. Regret lasted longer. Maya went home that night without making a decision. The offers sat in her bag like weights. She made dinner, tried to watch TV, couldn't focus. Finally, she sat down at her keyboard. Her fingers found the keys automatically. She started playing without thinking about what song. just playing. But it felt different now. Everything felt different. Before the video, playing music was private. It was hers. Nobody judged it. Nobody had opinions about it. Now millions of people had heard her play, had thoughts about her music, about her. The privacy was gone and she didn't know if she could get it back. She stopped playing, stared at the keyboard. This cheap, imperfect instrument had been enough for 3 years. Why wasn't it enough anymore? Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But it was her mom, so she picked up. Her mom asked if she'd made a decision yet. Maya said no. There was a long pause. Then her mom asked a question that hit different. She asked what Maya would tell someone else to do. If it was her best friend facing these choices instead of her, what would Maya say? Maya thought about it. If it was someone else, she'd tell them to go for it. Take the chance. Stop playing it safe. But it was easier to give that advice than to take it. Her mom seemed to read her mind. She said that was always how it worked. We saw things clearly, for other people, but got blind when it came to our own lives. Then she said something Maya wasn't expecting. She said she'd been saving money. Not much, but some. Enough to help for a few months if Maya needed it. Enough so Maya didn't have to make decisions based only on fear. Maya started crying. She told her mom she couldn't take her money. Her mom was on a fixed income, needed every dollar. But her mom insisted, said she'd been setting aside a little bit each month since the cancer, just in case, just for emergencies, and watching her daughter finally have a chance to follow her dreams. That qualified as an emergency. After they hung up, Maya sat in the dark for a long time. The offers were still in her bag, still unanswered. But something had shifted. The fear was still there. But so was something else. Something that felt like the tiniest bit of hope. The next morning, Maya called the conservatory first. She thanked them for the offer, told them it was incredibly generous, but she had to decline. Going back to school full-time felt like going backward. She didn't want to be a student again. She'd already lost too many years. She needed to move forward, not sideways. The person on the phone sounded disappointed but understanding. Said if she ever changed her mind, to reach out. The offer wasn't going anywhere. Then Maya called Richard Chen, the composer. When he answered, she could hear music in the background. He was working. She almost hung up, felt like she was interrupting something important. But he sounded happy to hear from her. She asked him questions. Real questions. What would the mentorship actually look like? How much time would it take? Would she be able to work part-time, support herself? He was honest with her. Said it would be hard. Composing didn't pay well at first. Sometimes not for years. He could teach her and introduce her to people. But he couldn't promise money. Couldn't promise success. Just opportunity. Maya appreciated the honesty. She told him she needed more time to think. He said he understood. Told her to take all the time she needed. But then he said something that stuck with her. He said he'd watched her video probably 50 times. And what stood out wasn't just her technical skill. It was the emotion, the honesty. That was rare. That was valuable. And you couldn't teach it in school. You either had it or you didn't. She had it. After she hung up, Maya called the Westside Performance Hall. The venue manager answered on the second ring. Her name was Diana Wu. She sounded busy but made time to talk. Maya asked about the resident artist position, the details, the expectations. Diana explained that she'd perform Friday and Saturday nights. 2 sets each night. She could play whatever she wanted. Original compositions. Covers. Whatever felt right. They wanted her authentic voice. That's what people responded to in the video. The salary wasn't amazing, but it was more than she made at Romano's. And it was just 2 nights a week, which meant she could do other things too, like work with Richard Chen, develop her compositions, figure out this music thing without having to bet everything on it. Diana also mentioned that the venue had a small recording studio in the basement. Residents could use it for free during off hours. Maya could record her original music, build a portfolio, see what happened. That detail changed everything, because suddenly it wasn't just one choice or another. It could be both. She could have stability and possibility, safety and risk. She didn't have to choose between surviving and dreaming. Maya asked if she could come see the venue. Diana said absolutely. She could come by that afternoon if she wanted. Before going to the venue, Maya stopped by Romano's. It was mid-afternoon. The lunch rush was over. Mr. Romano was doing paperwork at the bar. She sat down next to him. She told him she was going to take the performance hall job, that she'd need to adjust her schedule at the restaurant, maybe work just lunches or a few days a week, until she knew if the music thing was really going to work out. She waited for him to be upset, to tell her she had to choose, but instead, he smiled, said he'd been hoping she'd find a way to do both, that she didn't have to burn everything down to build something new. He'd work with whatever schedule she needed. Then he poured them both a glass of wine, raised his glass and said, "Here's to taking chances. Here's to finally going after what you want. Here's to being brave." Maya raised her glass, but she didn't feel brave. She felt terrified, excited and terrified at the same time, like she was standing at the edge of something huge and couldn't quite see the bottom. That evening, she went to see the West Side Performance Hall. It was a beautiful old building with exposed brick and warm lighting. The stage was small and intimate, about 100 seats. The piano was a Steinway, well-maintained. She ran her fingers across the keys and they sang. Diana showed her the dressing room, the recording studio, introduced her to the sound guy. Everyone was nice, normal. They treated her like a musician, not like a viral video sensation. It felt good. Maya took the job, signed the contract right there. Her first performance would be in 2 weeks. Diana asked if she needed more time to prepare. Maya said no. If she waited too long, she'd talk herself out of it. Walking to her car afterward, Maya felt like she was floating, or maybe falling. She couldn't tell which. She'd just agreed to perform in front of strangers, twice a week, every week. What had she been thinking? But underneath the panic was something else, something she hadn't felt in years. It took her a while to recognize what it was. Excitement. Pure, terrifying, wonderful excitement. She got in her car and just sat there for a minute. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. She pulled out her phone and texted her mom. Just 3 words. "I did it." Her mom's response came immediately. Just a bunch of heart emojis and the words she'd been waiting years to hear. "I'm so proud of you." The 2 weeks before her first performance felt like 2 minutes and 2 years at the same time. Maya practiced every spare moment she had, on her keyboard at home. On the piano at the venue during the slow afternoons when Diana let her come in early, her fingers were sore. Her back ached from sitting so long, but she couldn't stop. She decided to play mostly original compositions, songs she'd written over the years and never shared with anyone. Songs about her father's illness, about working double shifts and coming home exhausted, about dreams that felt too far away to reach, about the weight of responsibility and the fear of letting people down. They weren't happy songs exactly, but they were honest. And Richard Chen had been right. Honesty was what people connected with. She'd also included a few covers, songs everyone knew but arranged in her own way, made them sound different, more personal. She wanted the audience to have something familiar to hold on to while she took them somewhere new. The night of her first performance, Maya threw up twice, once at home and once in the venue bathroom. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Diana found her sitting on the floor backstage with her head between her knees, trying to remember how to breathe. Diana sat down next to her, didn't say anything at first, just sat there. Then she told Maya a secret. She said, "Every single performer who'd ever played at this venue felt exactly the same way before their first show. Every single one. The nerves meant it mattered, meant she cared, and that was good. That was what made performances real." Maya asked what happened if she messed up. If she forgot the music or hit wrong notes or froze completely. Diana smiled and said then she'd be human. And humans messed up. That was kind of the whole point. At 8 o'clock, Diana announced her, introduced her as the musician who'd captured the internet's heart and was about to capture theirs. The audience applauded. Maya walked onto the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The spotlight was brighter than she expected. She couldn't see individual faces past the first few rows, just darkness and the glow of phone screens. People were already recording. Of course they were. Everything she did now would be recorded and shared and judged. She'd have to get used to that. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, took one breath, then another. Her fingers found the keys. The first song was called Borrowed Time, the same one she'd played at Romano's that night. The one that started everything. She figured if she was going to put herself out there, she might as well go all the way. The first notes came out shaky. She hit a wrong key in the second measure and her heart stopped. But she kept going, pushed through. By the chorus, her hands had steadied. By the bridge, she'd forgotten about the audience. There was just the music and the piano and the story she was trying to tell. When the song ended, the applause startled her back to reality. It was loud, genuine. A few people were already wiping their eyes. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe this was going to be okay. She played for 90 minutes, 15 songs total. Some worked better than others. She fumbled the transition between two pieces and had to pause and start over. On another song, she got so lost in the music that she forgot to count measures and had to improvise her way back on track. But those imperfections somehow made it better, more real. The audience wasn't watching a perfect performance. They were watching someone trying. Someone being brave enough to be imperfect in public. After the show, people wanted to talk to her, take photos, tell her their stories. One woman said her daughter was taking piano lessons and had been ready to quit. Then she'd seen Maya's video. Now she practiced every day. A man told her that her music helped him through his mother's funeral. He'd played Borrowed Time on repeat for weeks. Maya didn't know what to say to these people. Didn't feel qualified to have meant something to strangers. But she smiled and thanked them and signed the napkins and programs they handed her. She stayed until the last person left, until Diana finally had to kick her out so they could close. The drive home felt surreal. She'd done it. She'd actually performed, and she hadn't died, hadn't failed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. That had to count for something. Over the next few months, Maya fell into a new rhythm. She worked lunch shifts at Romano's 3 days a week. Mr. Romano had hired additional staff to cover what she couldn't do anymore. He seemed happy to do it, said business had actually increased since word got out that the viral piano girl still worked there part-time. She performed at the Westside Performance Hall every Friday and Saturday night. The crowds grew steadily. Some nights they had to turn people away. Diana was already talking about moving her to the main concert hall if the momentum continued. During the weekdays, Maya worked with Richard Chen on her compositions. They'd meet at his studio and he'd help her develop her rough ideas into complete pieces. He taught her about structure and harmony and how to translate emotion into notes. He introduced her to producers and other musicians. Slowly, carefully, she was building a network. A career, it wasn't easy. Some nights she was so exhausted she could barely move. Money was still tight even with the venue salary. She had to budget carefully. No eating out. No unnecessary purchases. Her apartment was still small and the sink still leaked. But it was manageable. She was making it work. The hardest part was the constant attention. The video had never really gone away. It still circulated online. New people discovered it every day, which meant new people recognized her. At the grocery store, at the gas station, waiting in line at the coffee shop. Most people were nice. Some were weird. A few were mean. She learned to smile and keep moving. 6 months after that first performance, something unexpected happened. Richard Chen called her with news. A documentary filmmaker wanted to do a short film about her story. From waitress to musician. The journey. The struggle. The success. They'd follow her for a few months. Interview people who knew her. Capture her performances. Maya's first instinct was to say no. She didn't want cameras following her around. Didn't want her whole life dissected for entertainment. But Richard encouraged her to think about it. Said it was a chance to control her own narrative. To tell the real story instead of letting the internet make up whatever they wanted. She talked to her mom about it. Her mom said it was her choice. But she also pointed out that Maya's story might help other people. People who'd given up on their dreams because life got hard. Because bills needed paying and family needed help. Maybe seeing someone find their way back to their passion would give others permission to do the same. That's what convinced her. Not the exposure or the opportunity, but the idea that maybe her struggle meant something. That the years of sacrifice and the fear and the late nights playing alone in her apartment weren't wasted. They were part of the story. The documentary took 8 months to complete. When it finally came out, it premiered at a small film festival. Maya wasn't sure what to expect. Watching herself on screen felt uncomfortable. Seeing her tiny apartment and her old waitress uniform and the cheap keyboard she'd played for so long. Hearing her coworkers talk about how quiet she'd been. How no one really knew her. But then there were other moments. Her mother crying while talking about watching Maya give up music school. Mr. Romano describing the night she'd played at the retirement party. Diana Wu talking about how raw and vulnerable Maya's first performance had been, and footage of her current performances. The growth, the confidence, the full venue. The documentary ended with Maya playing a new composition she'd written specifically for the film. She'd called it Second Chances. It was about starting over. About finding courage you didn't know you had. About the space between giving up and trying again. When the lights came up in the theater, people were standing, clapping. Maya stood in the back, overwhelmed and grateful, and still a little bit terrified. Someone from a major record label approached her afterward, said they wanted to talk. About an album. About a tour. About taking this to the next level. A year ago, an offer like that would have paralyzed her with fear. Would have felt too big, too risky, too impossible. But she'd learned something over these past months. She'd learned that impossible just meant it hadn't happened yet. That fear was always going to be there. You just had to decide it wasn't going to be in charge anymore. Maya didn't sign anything that night. She took the business card. Said she'd think about it. Talk to Richard. Talk to her mom. Make a decision with clear eyes instead of panic or desperation. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the decision. Whatever she chose, she'd figure it out. She always did. Later that night, Maya went back to her apartment. The same small space she'd lived in for years. But it felt different now. Less like a place she was stuck and more like a place she was choosing. For now, anyway. Until she decided to choose something else. She sat down at her old keyboard. The one with sticky keys and crackling speakers. She should probably upgrade soon. Could afford something better now. But she kind of loved this one. It had been there for the lonely nights. The scary nights. The nights when music was the only thing that made sense. Her fingers found the keys and she started playing. Nothing specific, just sounds and feelings and melodies that came from somewhere deep. No one was recording. No one was watching. It was just her and the music. The way it used to be. The way it would always be, no matter what else changed. And for Maya Chen, who used to be just a waitress, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.